Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, we have 1 minute. Christina, you are already the co-host, I guess. Yes, okay. Yeah, I think you have the co-host status. Yeah, you already have it. So if you co-host can just let the people in, because when I start presenting, I'm a little bit overwhelmed doing it at the same time. Yeah. So thanks to everybody who's showing up to our meetup. Actually, this XR Bavaria Meetup is, we are doing this very frequently. I was just checking with Meetup. I think this is like my, I don't want to lie, 50th Meetup or something like that. It's like, wow, I'm doing this for quite some time. But yeah, still enjoying it. Okay, and this time we are talking about the metaverse. In the other meetups, just if you wonder, we are talking about XR topics in general. It's not like that we talk about the metaverse all the time, but it's always about XR, AR, and all these immersive technologies. And we are the XR Bavaria, and we are a association here in Bavaria, dedicated to the XR community, getting the XR community together, featuring people and companies, and promoting the XR technologies in general. If you want to join us, please do so. I may come back to this later on, but again, as I said, we have a very tight schedule, and so I'm gonna get this thing started right. If you are wondering, Thorsten Fell can't be with us today. We are very sorry about that, because he had an emergency with his family. Like 1 hour ago, he told me that he can't join us. We wish our best to Thorsten and his family. So, okay, then let's get this show on the road. My name is Clarence Bertzen. I am the chairman of the Extended Reality Bavaria, XRB in short, and I'm an XR consultant, and I have my own little agency, Design for Real, based here in Munich. And I'm going to give you a short introduction, because I wanted to give you a little introduction what the metaverse is all about, because I think it's not everybody's talking about it, but there are different definitions, and I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview what the metaverse term metaverse stands for in general. Okay, definition one. The first definition, I got this one from Wikipedia, and this is like 1 year ago. This was the definition, and I'm just gonna read it. The metaverse is a consistent and persistent digital space created by the convergence of virtual, augmented, and physical reality, including the sum of all virtual worlds, augmented reality, and the internet. The term is commonly used to describe the concept of a future integration of the internet composed of persistent, shared 3D virtual worlds connected into a perceived virtual universe. In the metaverse, users can co-create and live in these worlds, learn, work, and celebrate. Oh, Gesundheit. So this was a lot. But I think in this sentences, there's a lot of things, like when we are talking about the metaverse, most of the time we are talking about immersive technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality. And you talk about creating different worlds that are, okay, somebody's making some noise. Can you please turn off your microphone if it's already on? Thank you very much. So and these worlds are woven together, and you can move in between them. And you have, as you see in the last sentence, what you can do with this is to live in these worlds, learn in these worlds, work in these worlds, and even celebrate in these worlds, which is beautiful. And then there was the second definition, which was kind of a very different approach to it. This is Wikipedia as well, but today, this is what I found today. And there you can see the metaverse development is often linked to the advancing virtual reality technology due to increasing demand for immersion. Recent interest in the metaverse development is influenced by Web3, I guess it's 3.0, a concept for a decentralized integration of the internet, Web 3.0, and the metaverse have been used as buzzwords to exaggerate development progress of various related technologies and projects for public relation purposes. Information privacy, user addiction, and user safety are concerns with the metaverse, stemming from challenges facing the social media and the video game industry as a whole. Okay, as you can see, these are very different approaches to the metaverse, and I think both of them are kind of true, depending on the way you see it. What you can see here is that the emphasis is here on the Web 3.0, the decentralization, and the buzzword. Yeah, and nobody can deny that the metaverse in some way is a buzzword right now. And but I think it's kind of harsh to say that the metaverse is a buzzword for the exaggeration of the development process, which I think is kind of nasty to say. But this is what you find on Wikipedia right now. Maybe we have time to discuss this later on. And if you think about the metaverse, you will always think about the representation of the metaverse in cinema, like Ready Player One, where you can basically dive into this photorealistic, absolutely immersive world. And this is in some ways what people expect that are not from the industry to the metaverse to be like. And as you can see, all these the metaverse idea is a futuristic idea. And the question is why we are talking about it right now, if it is kind of a futuristic concept. And I think the reason why we talk about it right now is this guy here, because he basically said, okay, I'm not gonna do social media anymore, I'm gonna do the metaverse. And to top it all off, just kill the whole name of my company and make the metaverse a term my own. So this is basically what happened, and since then nobody could ignore that the metaverse is a thing. But at the same time, I think Mark Zuckerberg is a very strange evangelist for the metaverse. Sorry, I have some. Thank you for the metaverse. But still, I think he is the reason why so many people are now interested in the metaverse. And then there is the prospect of making a lot of money with it. And if there's the prospect of making a lot of money with it, of course, people get interested. I'm a little bit cautious when it comes to this fancy colored charts where it says, oh my God, and you will get rich if you invest in the metaverse now. But if you think back about all the prospects that we were having about XR technologies, like if all of these came true, we would all be sitting around, everybody, man, woman, child, and dog, with VR glasses on right now. That didn't happen. So I'm a little bit cautious about it. But okay, let's say there is money to be made out of the metaverse, and that's why people, of course, are very interested in it. But what are the building blocks of the metaverse? Of course, one of the building blocks is, of course, the immersion part. Yeah, that you basically strap a device to your head and you have different experiences inside of a virtual space in which you are immersed and embodied. And maybe it's music that you're listening to, maybe it's a game that you're experiencing, maybe it's something where you learn or socialize with people. Yeah, this is basically what the metaverse technology is all about. And of course, you have these XR interfaces. As I said, the embodiment, the part with the avatars, that is always associated with the metaverse. Then the idea that you meet something, the interpersonal space, that you meet other people in this virtual space and communicate with them. Of course, you have always the immersion. And then you have the integration of AR and VR to these technologies. And then it is always associated with these haptic feedbacks where you can touch something, where you can manipulate something. Yeah. Yes, and then you as we already said, there's this concept of the decentralization, which is kind of an abstract thing to talk about. Right now, you have like gatekeepers who are in charge of the information that you can publish to the web. For example, on social media, you have like YouTube or Facebook, and they are basically in charge of what is published, what is not published. And with a decentralized approach, basically everybody is his own master. You are master of your own information, and you can publish whatever you want, and you are in charge of that. This is basically the idea. And this is very close associated with the idea of the metaverse. And then you have the idea of the creator economy, that you are basically able to generate money inside the metaverse, actual money, yeah? And this is with asset stores, that you create assets for virtual spaces, that you are doing commerce in the metaverse, and that you can shop real items inside the metaverse, and that you can trade something like NFTs or other digital items that are maybe unique and that are then in your possession and stay there. Yeah, and talking about NFTs, this is also an aspect that you always find associated with the metaverse, the buying and selling of NFTs, of skins, of items. And then there is the idea of selling or purchasing virtual real estate with the promise that you're gonna add value to these virtual possessions. Yeah, that's always there. Yeah, and then when we talk about the metaverse, where do we stand right now with that? And I was in a workshop, and the client told me, we have to get into the metaverse. And I was thinking about...
Is this meeting?
Yeah. That is this meeting, yeah. And I was thinking, what metaverse are we talking about? What is this? There is not one metaverse. There isn't one. It's more like a multiverse. But the difference is not like with Doctor Strange, you can open some fancy portal and you jump from one metaverse to the other. There is no link between them. Basically, you have many platforms, and there is no standard between these platforms.
Kann ich die Tomaten zu Ende schneiden?
Oh my God. Can you please turn off your microphones, please? Guys, please do it. Yeah, where was I? Yeah, there is no standards between the different metaverse platforms that are called this way right now. And as you can see, they are like even Grand Theft Auto Online is in some way, some people say this is a metaverse. I don't know. You be the judge. But what you can say is they are very different platforms. There is no way to jump between them. So you can't say there's one metaverse right now, but there are many platforms that are using metaverse-like technologies, and there's no interoperability. Okay? So that is it for me. And I see that Avi already joined us. Hello. And that's where I hand it over to you guys to take it away. Avi, I will make you the co-host.
Thank you. I'm glad I got to listen to part of your presentation. That was fun.
Yeah. Okay. Then I achieved my goal. I didn't want to get. It is very intimidating to talk about this in front of a guy who is basically was part of the invention of all these concepts. You know. Yeah. So
I'm the first one to make fun of the name of it, though. So
okay. Yeah.
We're definitely in agreement. Yes.
Yeah. That's nice. That's nice. So very glad to have you with us. And Christina will take it from here.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm so happy and grateful that Avi Bar-Zeev, the I think like headmaster of the whatever verse you describe yourself on Twitter, is joining us for this conversation. And yeah, we're really pumped to have you, since with like being at Disney, Second Life, Keyhole, Microsoft, Amazon, and your own company, Reality Prime, you've basically shaped the metaverse as we know it today. And I want to also like share my screen now to introduce what made me so happy about meeting Avi and having Avi here, which is, of course the XR Guild, which was founded last summer and was like an answer to my prayers before I could even light a candle. So for me, this metaverse experience now is basically the third time that we are experiencing like a kind of Wild West in Western society. And while I wasn't born when people like traveled to California, embarrassingly enough, I can still remember the second societal Wild West, which was the internet in the 90s on like a 14.4 dial-up connection. And that was like really comparable to the metaverse as we experienced it between 2016 and 2021. It was like a very colorful space where everybody could express themselves and post their own thoughts on their own home pages. Still, then we got like the .com bubble, which brought like many bad actors in, and I had to clean my machine of a virus like every 3 days. And this also like backfired to the reputation of the whole internet, and then switched to the internet nowadays basically being controlled by the big five. So if you aren't like on good terms with Facebook or Google or Amazon, you aren't happening in the internet. And the same experience I had when Mark Zuckerberg announced the rebranding to Meta in late 2021. I was then like CMO at Tivoli Cloud VR. And before we had that in our tagline and everything was nice. And suddenly so many like evil, chaotic things happened. And this metaverse hype was actually a nail in Tivoli's coffin, because like we, for example, we lost many users when we announced that we are digging into NFTs. And yeah, I was basically really, really worried. And then my prayers were answered with the XR Guild, www.xrguild.org, which was founded by Avi. And this is the main agenda of the XR Guild. The XR Guild is dedicated to the ethical development of XR and the metaverse for the collective benefit of humanity. And now finally, I want to give the word to Avi. And please, could you tell us how you came up with the idea to found a XR Guild and to announce these principles we're going to talk later on today?
Yeah, thanks. It was over a year ago we started hearing a lot about this hype, and I actually knew ahead of time that Facebook was going to rebrand because I work with the company that owned the trademark for Meta, and so they had to secure that ahead of time. So I couldn't say anything, but I had an idea. I think the impetus for this comes from looking at history, and like you said, looking at 1999 to 2000, and I was doing a lot of things during that bubble as well, trying to survive in the crashing wave, and seeing a lot of the same mistakes happening over and over and over again. And part of what I think of ethics is learning from the past, learning from the mistakes that we make and not making them again is part. It's not just about morality. It's about being smart and doing things that work. And so there's a lot of things that didn't work. And so we wanted to figure out a way to help people understand how to do that. So you don't have to have 30 years of experience in order to make all the mistakes and then finally do the right thing after 30 years. You should be able to do it immediately on joining the field. You should have that information ready so that you know what mistakes were made and where to go. So that's what's been missing. And you know, I don't know about other countries, but here we didn't get a good enough education in ethics and design history. And you know, none of that happens. In engineering, maybe there's a little bit. In civil engineering, there, you know, you have to become a professional engineer and pass a test, and there's a lot of thought about, well, what if the bridge falls down, or what if the building falls down? But in computer science, really very little, and definitely none in gaming and the fields that overlap here. So we feel like we just need this, and a lot of people felt the same way. I put up a few polls on Twitter. I have something like 5,000 followers on Twitter, and so we put up some polls. And 90% of the people were like, yes, please do something about this. We need ethics. We need an organization that thinks about this. And some of the people, you know, would go so far as to say we need regulation. We need a lot of top-down control. But we're taking a different approach. We're saying, no, we think the people in the industry are smart enough. They just may not have the grounding and the education yet to know some of these issues, to understand some of these issues. So they may be making the same mistakes innocently, and we can help them, because if they join, we will hopefully provide information that will help them do their jobs better, and they will be happier, and their companies will be happier, and the consumers will be happier. And we'll do as much as we can from the bottom up, and somebody else will be thinking about regulation from the top down where it's necessary. But we want to try to address the greatest number of makers, of developers, which is not just coders, but designers and writers and product managers and even CEOs, to the extent we have a few that are like, yes, we need this too. So that's where it came from. And we just launched it in June. It's only been really officially out for a couple of months, and there's still a lot of work to do, right? I'm busy trying to get the library working. As president, of course, my job is to do everything. And so I have to write a lot of code and make these things work. And then hopefully we'll get more and more volunteers and raise some money, and we can start paying people to do work as well. That's where we are today. It's new, but it's necessary, and we want to grow it.
Yeah, and we're like, yeah, as I said, so happy that you're here and introducing the guild to us. And yeah, personally, I think, yeah, it would be wonderful if many people would join the guild, but it's also like to guarantee like a fair evolution of the metaverse. It would be wonderful if every developer in the field could at least read through, or in the best way internalize our principles, because I think we have really a chance to develop like a fair new world with that metaverse. And so I'd say, let's dig into our principles. I'm going to read them out, and then.
But before you do this, one thing I want to add for the previous comment was, some people will get angry at certain companies when they do things that violate privacy. You know, and I'll speak out too. If you read my Twitter, I'm very outspoken about when companies make those mistakes. But we want to be very careful to appeal to everybody. We want the people, even in the companies that are making the biggest mistakes, to join, because they're the ones that can benefit the most from this. They're the ones that actually really want to reach. So we want these principles to be something that almost anybody could agree to. If you care about other people and you want to do well, these principles should hopefully be appealing, and they're open to debate. So if you join the guild, we can amend them, we can improve them. And we're talking right now about some things we didn't cover yet around child protection, for example. So these will get better over time, but let's start with what we have today. Yeah. Today, you must agree to these principles to join, but they can change with your help.
And the wholesome idea is also that if many of like employees of a big corporation agree to these ethical principles, then a CEO can, as greedy as they want to, if the employees go like, I want to rethink and discuss any of my decisions in building the metaverse, this is also good agenda against greed of singular persons.
Yeah.
So
it's not, to be clear, it's not a union. We're not going to go on strike and collectively bargain in that sense, but we think that we want to normalize the ability for anybody to take the time necessary to think these things through. A lot of times we just rush through these decisions. We don't take the time to think about the implications. And ethics is all about thinking through the implications. And so if we just make it normal for everybody in the design process to take some time to think about what happens if this doesn't go the way we're expecting it, what can go wrong, and also to know who else in the company has their back, who will support them. If you ever do have to stand up and say this is wrong, you want to know that there's a group of people already in the company who will be there to back you up. That's what's important right now.
Well, let's go to our first principle. Every person matters.
Yeah, and so if you look at Facebook's responsible innovation principles, a lot of people, including me, pointed out that principle number 4 was put people first. Well, if you're putting people first, that should be principle number 1, and then that really guides everything. And so we put that first. We're saying the first thing, the most important thing is that we don't leave anybody behind. Nobody, as they say, gets thrown under the bus, right? If you know that phrase, nobody gets tossed out or scapegoated, including people who make mistakes. We want to try to work with them. We want to try to help them. But very, very importantly, we have to think globally in terms of all people and not just the early adopters or the people who might be our first customers.
Yeah, and it's also like sometimes the best ideas come from 18-year-old volunteers. And I really like this idea that everybody gets heard. So let's flip to the next one.
Yeah, exactly. Even the quietest voices, sometimes especially the quietest voices, are the most important to listen to. And that's something I've had to learn over 30 years, because I can be very strong opinion, and I had to quiet down and actually learn to listen to everybody else, and still work on that. So freedom requires mutual tolerance and respect. This again is one of the founding principles, is that we can't get to the place we want to get to by walking all over people or taking advantage of people. It really requires listening and respecting other people, which means, you know, and this, as someone who grew up in New York, I'm very honest, I'm very direct, but I had to learn that not everybody can be dealt with in the same way. You can't just assume everybody wants to hear your criticism immediately. Sometimes you have to be very soft with people who come from different cultures. And so it's really about treating people the way they need to be treated versus the way I want to be treated. Not the golden rule, I might call it the platinum rule, of thinking about the other people. What do they need to be able to hear the message well and to feel respected, and to be respected in all senses. And that requires, again, a lot more listening than we often do.
Yeah, and I think this becomes especially important as like the metaverse not only combines like one small cultural circle, but actually the whole world. And people like tend to have like a different education or upbringing, be they from Bavaria or from Egypt. And so like walking in each other's shoes and like really also taking care of their cultural values, I think is a really important factor for good combined discussion and development process. Yeah. So let's dig into the next principle, which is freedom and privacy are inseparable human rights. And that speaks directly to my heart as a privacy.
Oh, yes. This one is not as obvious to everybody. Some people have thought a lot about this, and other people, there are a lot of people I know who will say, if I'm doing nothing wrong, I don't care if everybody knows about it. I don't care if the world knows my vacation photos or my information. But that's not the point. The point is not that people know it. The point is that if people have your private information, they can use it against you. And so even if you've done nothing wrong, your preferences, your choices, things like that can be used. And in some cases in the United States, for sure, there are so many laws that you could be breaking any law at any given time and not realize it. There could be laws against walking in a place or driving in a place or anything you do. If a police officer really wanted to harass you, they could, because there's just enough, there in the legal body to be able to do so. And we really count on having this notion of freedom to be able to do our own things and not be harassed in these ways. And a lot of it does require keeping this information private. There's a reason we have in the US, we have the one of the early amendments was about soldiers could not be quartered in your home. It's like, well, what's the big deal if a soldier gets to live in your house? It's because they get to hear your conversation. It's because they get to look through your things. They get to know what you believe and then report it, because their job would be to report it. And so the idea that we have to keep privacy protected means we get to think what we want and say what we want within private circles and not be oppressed for those thoughts. And if you give that up, if privacy is given, we've seen what happens when an advertising company can use that private information to specifically target somebody with an ad that they know is going to work, but that same ad would upset somebody else. So they make sure that the person who's getting the ad is vulnerable first to that particular information. That makes it very, very effective, but it's a violation of that person's privacy, because their own idiosyncrasies are being used against them in a very cynical kind of way.
Yeah, and I also think it's like very dangerous if too much of my very private and personal information is stored in a database, because at the moment I don't have anything to hide in front of like the German government. They're cool, but there are some things my headset can see about me which I might not want my employer to know, and therefore bad thing would be like not to have private information of users stored in any means per se. And I hope
even if you like the government today, these things can change fast. And you saw in the United States with conservative governors making abortion illegal. Now the health information that women have recorded is now potentially going to expose them to legal liability. So we want to be very careful to not share that and to not even store it if we don't have to. And this goes to the heart of the metaverse, because so much more information will be collected in XR than we currently have. And then especially AR, because it's your interactions with the world, but also in VR, that information is much more sensitive than even location data and personal.
Eye tracking can know better than myself if I got a mental illness, if I got an alcohol problem or whatsoever. And that's really spooky. Let's slip to our principle number 4. We seek to teach what we know and to increase dialogue, understanding, and learning.
And this speaks to the philosophy of how we want to try to have the guild be successful. So we could have set up an organization that was going to lobby the government for legislation. We didn't. We could have set up an organization that was meant to be outspoken as a public critic. We didn't. We can speak publicly, but we've agreed that it will require 75% of the organization to support those statements, so that we're sure that we really want to say something. It isn't just going to be off the cuff, as they say. What we really want to do is teach. We want to take what we know and figure out a way to replicate and multiply the information that we've already collected and share it out. And that's going to be the best way to help people, is going to be as a resource to be able to help raise the level of understanding, and everybody hopefully will make the right choices. And even if everybody doesn't, there'll be enough people to do it, so that'll be kind of a viral immunity. Like we'll have enough people to say the right thing that even one person being a jerk will feel isolated and won't do that.
Cool. Yeah, share the knowledge on eye level, and help also people new to the field learn. So
exactly, and we'll have mentoring, not yet, but we'll have actual mentoring between people who are more experienced or less experienced, both career mentoring but ethical mentoring as well, we're starting with more general knowledge sharing. We'll move on to the one-on-one mentoring at some point soon.
Awesome. Principle number 5.
So here we're
XR hardware are for everyone.
I was going to say, we're overlapping a lot with Tony Parisi's 7 rules of the metaverse. If you haven't read that, you should read Tony Parisi's. And he broke them out into 7 rules. We took the 7 and kind of compressed it down to 3 because there's some overlap and we have a lot of other principles to cover. So this is very much though that we have to be thinking about these things as being for everybody, including children. How do we make sure that children can use this safely is a very important consideration. Today, a lot of VR stuff is really not safe for kids. And that's something that we have to decide, but also just physically that it's accessible for everybody. Somebody who has big hair should be able to wear a headset and not feel like it's going to ruin their hair or not fit. People who have different sized faces. I just read that the IPD of the new Pico 4, the minimum IPD is like 62 millimeters. Like that's big. That's not going to fit a lot of people. Exactly. So there's a lot of people who are smaller than that. So the question is it going to work? Is it going to be comfortable for people? We'll see. So we want to push this
thing that it's like they're leaving out the women, like for example with the index controllers. I was so pumped, finally I can get hand tracking, and I always make the peace sign, but to render that on the index controllers I have to make the devil's sign, which is kind of a paradox.
That's not what you want.
Principle number 6, no
this also overlaps.
Company or country should own or control the metaverse. That also speaks so much to my heart. Yeah, this again, Tony had this out in his principles as well, in his 7 rules. And obviously today, this is one of the main reasons that people are reacting with decentralization is reacting to this feeling of things have gotten too centralized, there's too much control. And so we really want long-term to solve that. And you know, I could talk a long time about whether the current approaches to decentralization will actually work or not. History informs us, and economics inform us of some problems with the things that people are doing, especially when people use the idea of one share, one vote, like in a DAO. That's plutocracy. That just winds up with re-centralization. We really have to have democracy of one person, one vote. Otherwise, it's not going to work. But that's for another day. So what we have to do is teach people about that and help promote this idea that no one entity should control this. It needs to be very democratic at the end of the day. And it's also like a great chance because it makes like a very colorful and diverse metaverse, which serves to everybody. So you could have like platforms who care for smartphone users like Mozilla Hubs on the one hand, and you can have like high-end PC VR platforms on the other hand, and everybody, jedem Tierchen sein Pläsierchen, we say in Germany, like everybody gets what they need. Still, I think we have, I hope it is the next principle, something coming up about standards, which might be beneficial for the idea of a decentralized metaverse. Let's see. The metaverse and XR should move toward being interoperable. That's my favorite. Open and extensible.
Yeah, so this is one where it would be difficult to say that it has to be this from day one, because clearly big companies are investing a lot of money and their first action is not going to be to simply open everything up for everybody. That's their first response is they need to figure out how they're going to make some money. And that's not good for everybody, but it's good for them. And they wouldn't invest otherwise if they didn't do it. And so, you know, we can't just wait for the open source solution to serve everybody, but that's where we want to go. And I think the way it's probably going to work out is we'll go through a period of walled gardens, of companies owning their own spaces. But as soon as the features are sort of normalized and the same everywhere, you'll see the equivalent of the Netscape browser, the open internet, the open metaverse will rise up above all walled gardens given time. And so this is telling us that we just have to be patient here and help. The standards take time. The standards are, you know, in some cases so easy that it's easy to have 15 standards, 15 ways of doing something. You have to agree. And not every company will agree up front, but over time they will, because they'll see the benefits of it.
Yeah, and I think yeah, it would be inhibiting if you would forbid companies, developers to do their own thing, because that would prevent like real invention. Still, it can be called out that if you got the choice for standards, do I take 4 or 5 bones for my avatar, and you see that yeah, most platforms only take 4 bones, then if there's no pressure on your inventory side, one should like agree to the standards which have been already established. And I think this will bring us on a really good way, because the dream in the end is that I could put up like one avatar and walk all the platforms with that seamlessly.
We'll get there eventually. That the business case has to be made for why it's in the company's interest, because it is more work for them to be able to support that. All right, we should, yeah, number 8.
Next one. Metaverse XR hardware and software should benefit end users and their communities.
And this one, I think, speaks to some of the business model questions that we see, that the metaverse should not be a Trojan horse for a business model that exploits its users. It should be direct. It should be providing a benefit to the people who are using it. The people who buy the hardware and software and pay the fees should get the benefit of that use. And we should really prohibit, or just as much as possible, dissuade companies from building business models that pretend to do one thing, but secretly monetize their users in another way. We should help them find better business models, help them find ways that they can survive and make money without exploiting anybody.
I love that one. But I switched to the next so that we still get time for the Q&A then. We are responsible for our individual decisions and collectively for the field.
And this is part of ethics. There are many different definitions of ethics. Some people say it's moral and religious. I don't. I think ethics is much more practical than that. It's not about necessarily my belief in the afterlife. It's about my belief in this life, my belief in what are we going to do right in this life, and how are we going to do well for each other and for our own interests. And you can be very self-interested and still be very ethical if you're thinking long-term. And as every developer, every person working in this field should be thinking long-term, that their decisions, what they do today, impacts somebody else tomorrow. And they're responsible for those decisions. Even if they're not the CEO of the company, they join the company, they're getting paid by the company. And even if some other part of the company is doing the stuff you think is evil, and the part you're doing is only good, you're still getting paid from the part of the other part of the company. So you have to think about the whole big picture. And what is ethical, what will do the best for people. And so it's sort of partly what do we owe each other, and partly what do we owe the future? What do we owe our children? What do we owe the world? That's really what it comes down to. And as a guild, we incorporated this as a guild. We didn't talk about that question, why is it a guild? But fundamentally because it's an association of professionals who can agree on things. And what we should be agreeing on is these ethics and codes of conduct, and holding ourselves responsible and accountable to these things.
And I think like it's similar, like we talked about in our introduction, that also like the smallest intern, so to say, can make a difference, can have a butterfly effect if they implement a good solution instead of a greedy one.
Anybody can speak up.
So principle number 10, design patterns that trick, confuse, or exploit people should be exposed and redesigned for safety. Yes.
Yeah, we should be looking for those dark patterns and calling them out and identifying when they are tricking people. And the companies that make them may or may not realize that. They may realize it, they hope they can get away with it. But I think this is where we do speak up, and this is where we say, no, that pattern is tricking people. A good example of that are the terms of service. When you have to use software right now, most people don't read them, they just click it. That's a dark pattern, because nobody wants to read these things. They're not written in a way that you can read them. And so we need to say that clearly. Unfortunately, the GDPR is leading the way on solving that. We in the US, we still have a ways to go on that issue, but we'll fix it. And because everybody knows that it's a bit of a fraud right now, we'll fix it.
Yeah, and it's also like a call to focus on what might my software do, what I'm not even aware of. Like I was digging into the ELISA effect of Joseph Weizenbaum, and he was like astonished himself. He was in 1965, he developed the first AI chatbot, and he was like almost shocked that his secretary asked for privacy to share her secrets with that chatbot. And so that's why I'm like really grateful that you put that into the principles, because it also calls us as developers to see where do I might trick users, what I didn't even expect, and to work against it.
Or just not work well, because we have like another example from AI is if you simply don't include a lot of the population in your training data, like has happened for facial ID, that it was only done with Caucasian light skin, then it's just not going to work with people with dark skin.
Yeah.
And that is essentially a design pattern where somebody made a bad choice about their data set. And we need to be conscious of the effect and fix that all the way at the beginning of the process.
So second last principle, we have a duty to help mitigate serious problems wherever possible.
Yeah, and this is again calling out these issues, but we want to really emphasize that it's on each of us to say when something is not going well. And this is, I think, one of the biggest criticisms that I have of Web3 is not that everything is bad about Web3, but a lot of the proponents of Web3 like to ignore the problems and only focus on the good things. And you can't. You have to call out, if you really want the good things to survive. It's like gardening, right? You have to pull out the weeds and tend to the plants and make sure the good plants grow and give them lots of water and air and fertilizer, and make sure that the bad ones are pulled out. We all have to do that. Or else we wind up with a really bad garden.
So the last principle speaks to the guild members, but in my opinion, to every developer in the field. It would be wonderful if everybody would adhere to these principles and inherit a good way of evolving the metaverse.
Yeah, and this one's very self-referential. It's almost doesn't need to be said if you agree to the other 11 principles. But the sub-bullets on this one, there's details for each of these principles, and the sub-bullets speak to what happens when somebody isn't adhering to the principles. And right now, the only thing we're really going to do about it is try to discuss it with them first and try to help. And then if somebody really isn't, then we have a process for voting and saying that somebody can no longer be a member of the guild if they really are violating the principles in a serious way. But it'll come down to a vote. First, a little council meets and tries to fix it, and then ultimately a vote. We have to establish those rules up front because it would be unfair to impose them later. So we try to make that clear what the process will be.
Okay. So thank you so much for elaborating on all these wonderful principles, and I'm going to stop the screen share now. So and I'm very happy that Clarence will be moderating our Q&A now.
Yes,
Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much for elaborating with us about these principles. Are there questions towards what we have already seen? I think there are some of these concepts are a little bit abstract for people who are not so much into the idea of the metaverse. Are there questions? No.
Yes, I have risen my hand.
Oh, there, this yellow thingy. Yes.
Welcome to the interwebs.
Yeah.
How can I join the guild?
Oh, great. Just come to the website. The website is www.xrguild.org. And you'll see the principles listed out with all the sub-bullets. So you can read all the details there. There's a special page at register.xrguild.org where you can register. and we ask you for some of your information that we keep very secure. We don't use cookies or anything else, but we do need some membership information to be able to mail to people. And there's also a place for donations, and we're in the process right now of seeing if we can raise enough money to do more. Like right now we have a little bit of money, and what we want to try to do is raise enough money so that we can hire a few people to do some of the things that I'm doing for free right now, and maybe expand a little faster than just what I can do by myself. I'm not going to make any money. I'm not going to get paid, but we can. We want to do some things like we want to produce content. So we're going to need some editors and producers to be able to help us record some interesting content that'll be like questions and answers. People can ask questions, and we'll have experts try to answer those questions. And there's a bunch of other things that we plan to do. We have those listed out as well. So come look at all the details. And we're happy to have you. We are thinking, the model, by the way, is right now we're incorporated as a nonprofit. We're a US tax exempt nonprofit in California, but we're hoping that other groups will form in other countries and other states, and the group can run itself the way it wants to, as long as we conform with the local laws. So there could be one or more in Germany, that groups of people who think the same way and self-organize, and we're happy to help with that as much as we can.
Okay. There's another question of Matthias here, raising the hand.
Yes, hello. I think it's a very interesting concept, and I think it's a good initiative to try to bring this in the right direction. And my question would be, do you plan some kind of platform to show what's possible, maybe to show the positive examples, or to show a positive possible metaverse? Is there some activities to make some XR Guild metaverse where you can show all your principles, which I think totally right, and I hope you get the right power to bring this on live. Is there some activities, or maybe in the future?
Yes, in part. I'd say we don't have the resources right now to go build our own 3D virtual world. I do have some experience in that area. I probably could help with it, but it's a lot of work. And so what we are hoping to do for now is to use existing platforms like Hubs and AltSpace, and to try to prune those down a little bit so they're safer. And they can be made safe. You can't open it to do everything with everybody. It's one of the things that Christina is helping with, is to set up the online spaces. And we'd love to have a persistent online space that we could think of as the guild hall, the place where the guild members come and meet. And that might be a place where you need a special key to enter. We have a system now of using cryptographic keys in order to enter some of our subdomains. And the idea would be you'd use one of the special guild keys to get in, and then there would be all sorts of nice resources inside. But that's a long-term plan, and we would love to do that, but we probably won't write the code that does all the 3D rendering and engine stuff, because we know how much work that is. That's several years of work right there. And by the way, I have to run. I have something at 11, but I'm supposed to join early into the white room, so I can stay for one more minute. But I would love to answer more questions on either Twitter. My handle is Avi Bar-Zeev at Twitter, or join our Discord. You can find the link to the Discord on the website link that I gave you. Come to the Discord or ask questions, or feel free to share my email, avi@xrguild.org, and you can ask me questions there. So maybe just take one more, and then I have to run to this other thing I pre-scheduled, sorry.
Niels, you're raising your hand?
Yes. Hi. Thank you for that presentation. Very interesting about the ethics. And my question is, which of the existing metaverses or platforms would you say does follow the most, does stick the most to your rules?
I think Hubs for sure, because first of all, Mozilla follows the W3C code of ethics. That's part of what we've incorporated as well in terms of the professional conduct as a standards, W3C standards compliant organization. That code of ethics is actually really strong in terms of anti-harassment, treatment of other people, and it's the most open 3D world right now based on standards. Is it the best? You can argue that there may be features in other ones. Like I don't love the way the heads vibrate when they talk. Like there's some UX issues I have with it. So I don't fully endorse all aspects of Hubs, but If we could fix a few of those things, I think it is the most forward-looking in terms of building out this ethical metaverse. Plus, it's not trying to be a giant world for everybody. You create a hub for a group of people for a purpose, and so you're much more likely to have positive interactions because you invite the people to that space as opposed to a bunch of underage kids wandering around harassing people like you may see on other platforms. And that needs policing and needs a whole bunch of things. I would argue against that other approach, as it has all sorts of problems.
All right. I think, thank you. That's it for Avi, I guess. Thank you very much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you.
If you guys want to get in touch with Avi, you have all the stuff you need in the chat. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you,
I'm
everybody.
posting
See
information
everybody.
in the chat, and thank you once again so much for joining us and sharing all that wonderful ideas.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Great. So as we move on in the program, I'm happy to introduce Thomas Riedel. He is the host and creator of the German Metaverse podcast, and he's a freelancing tech journalist. I will hand it to you, Thomas.
All right. Thank you very much. It will be very difficult to serve you something which will taste better what you already at right now. So I will give my best and start with sharing what I've prepared for you tonight. And you will see something like this here. So I will talk now for about 20 minutes about the metaverse in a way you might have never heard before. What you usually see and hear about the metaverse is some kind of aggregation, like everything people say you will find in a presentation. What I try to do is I try to find out what is actually true or makes sense for me at least. So this will be a little bit of a different approach. But before I can explain the metaverse in my very own way, I will say something a little bit about myself. Clarence was friendly enough to say hello to me already and say what I do. I'm indeed a journalist since a couple of years, working for all the different news outlets out there, especially for startup outlets. And the last 5 years, I was reporting for Digitale Leute, explaining people how to develop digital products. I'm also a podcast producer since I believe podcasts exist. So I love doing podcasts, and this is of course the reason why I have a podcast about the metaverse, because I try to do everything in podcast. That seems to be my natural way. And I'm a blood donor, so I donate blood almost every week. And if you are a healthy person and want to try out, I will encourage you to do so, because of the Corona pandemic and because of the war in the Ukraine, we need as much blood as possible. And on the other side, there's never been so few people donating blood as nowadays. So this has nothing to do with the metaverse, but I believe everybody can do something in this matter to help each other out. So I encourage you to be a blood donor. Try it out. It hurts only a little bit, but you make people happy and healthy and even rescue their lives. So it's a good thing to do. All right, enough about me. You can also check out my socials, of course, and check out the podcast, which is metaverse-podcast.de. It's in German, so for all the English people, I'm sorry. The artificial intelligence needs to get better to translate that automatically. All right. So everything started, as Clarence said, with the start of the hype. What happened there exactly? As you can see at the chart in the left corner, which is just Google Trends, I screen copied you. At one point of time, the chart skyrocketed and everybody was doing something. What was happening? Everybody was searching for the term metaverse. And in the internet, this means some other guys see that so many people start to search for the expression metaverse. And these are usually the SEO guys, the search engine optimization guys. And then they go to the editors and say, look, there's a new word. You have to write articles about that word, because then everybody who's looking for that word will find our page, which will mean more impressions, which will mean more money. So when Mark Zuckerberg had his keynote, which is almost a year ago, and we can't wait to the 11th of October for the next one, actually, to see what's happening next. Everybody was seeking for the metaverse expression, and something happened, which is very typical for the interwebs. A lot of articles popped up with the expression metaverse in. No matter if anybody knew actually what is the metaverse, what would the metaverse be? And the effect of this was there was a lot of bullshit in them, in all the magazines. They didn't write, we have no idea what the metaverse is. Usually what they did is they just said it will be something like Second Life, or it will be something with blockchain, or it's something social, or it's games, or something like that. So everybody was inventing something what the metaverse could be. And so everything we heard about that point was just a lot of guessing what the metaverse actually could be. And of course, this doesn't help at all to understand what the metaverse actually is. When Mark Zuckerberg did this because of a couple of reasons. One reason was that Facebook and his other sites had problems with growing. So people buying the stocks of his companies weren't happy that growth wasn't that fast anymore. So to keep up the wealth, he had to be inventive and do something. Also, he had problems with his image, with the image of Facebook and all the other companies. So he also had to change something. And so it was a very good idea to start something totally new and to create a new platform where he could actually dictate the rules and do things that he thinks are right and wrong. But because to that point of time, he was very dependent on Google and Apple. So this happened almost a year ago. And he could do this, of course, because he acquired Oculus in 2014. And he had almost everything in place to start that hype. And 11 months later, we have to say and agree, he started it. It worked out. It worked out pretty well. A lot of people are convinced now that there will be a metaverse, no matter if they like Facebook or not, or Mark Zuckerberg or not. By the way, if you have the chance, Google for Icelandverse on YouTube. You see the funny guy in the right corner. It's one of the best ways to persiflage Mark Zuckerberg's approach to explain the metaverse, the Icelandverse. It's gorgeous. It's the best fun piece I found on the interwebs. All right. A colleague of mine, Richard, said pretty soon after the keynote of Mark Zuckerberg, of all people, the person who was already overwhelmed with responsibly moderating a simple network of text and images, of all people, now wants us to entrust him with an entire universe. And I think this is a brilliant question. Mark Zuckerberg had a lot of problems with hate speech already on his platform. It was only text. Now, how does he actually want to moderate a platform which is a giant universe, a world where you can't moderate anything? So very good question. So this is a genius chart who shows us that this is also just a hype. So taking it too serious doesn't help at all, because if we look back, there are a lot of things which will happen all the time, and we have all the hypes all the time. And this is why I go, okay, this one I wanted to show. This is also a very funny chart, which is very important. When you look at it on a startup perspective, what you will find out that startups do one thing. They are what the investors want them to be. So when there is something like a big data hype, of course, every startup is suddenly a big data startup. When there is an AI hype, of course, the startups shift to being AI startups, no matter if they are an AI startup or a big data startup or not. And this is what actually happened also with the Metaverse hype. Everybody, no matter what they did and what product they had, suddenly became a Metaverse startup. And they could do that because nobody had any clue about what the Metaverse would be. So you are doing a multiplayer game, of course, I'm a Metaverse game. You're doing something with virtual reality, sure, Metaverse. Your augmented reality filters on your smartphone, all right, it's a Metaverse, and so on and so on. And of course, the last one I find is very funny. It's if you are a potato, you're of course also a Metaverse. And I believe this is not the right approach to tackle that problem. So we have a lot of stuff coming up in the internet, what actually could be the Metaverse, and this doesn't help at all. So before I will explain what I think is the very basic of the Metaverse, which will help us to define the Metaverse, I have to explain a concept which will shed light on what, how we can actually also deal with what happens right now, deal with the hype itself, deal with people who want to tell us what we should do, people who tell us what they think exactly the future will look like. And to understand that, we have to understand what a future narrative is. A narrative is an expression from the social sciences which popped up around the 90s. And you probably know this concept very much. You have heard the word, of course, a lot of times. And when I tell you the American dream is a perfect example of a narrative, you will, of course, understand what I mean, because it is a concept where you understand immediately what it means and what you have to do. The American dream says you can wash the dishes and still get a millionaire by being a good worker, by learning a lot of stuff, maybe do some tricks here and there. And then in the USA, because this is the greatest country of the world, no idea if that's true, but because it is the greatest country of the world, you can become a millionaire. That's the American dream. And that's a narrative, and it works very well. People believe in it, and this is why they go to the US and do things to get rich. A future narrative is some kind of a variation of it, which will tell you that your gain will be in the future, or if you do it in a dystopian way, the pain will be in the future. So you know also those kinds of future narratives. For example, when you hear somebody say, in the future, we will all be, or we will all have. Somebody saying that sentence, he's using the formal sense of future narrative. I will make two examples to make that very clear what I mean. For example, when we will leave in more people from North Africa into Germany, Germany will be flooded with the Arab guys and will no more be German anymore. That's a typical German thing we have to fight because of the AfD, which is a very right-wing party in Germany. And what they say is that our country will be destroyed if we let in more people from the Northern Africa. And of course, why they do that is pretty clear. They want to frighten us, and this is a future narrative. Another one, you know, also is if we do not take care about the nature, our livelihood will be destroyed. We will not be able to live in a good way on this planet. And this is also a future narrative, which will frighten you to change your behavior. And these are two future narratives which project something into the future and tell you, if you don't do something, other things will happen to you, good or a bad thing. And there's actually a tool which helps you to understand what is happening, and it's called future literacy. And you can ask the W, the why questions, what, who, what, why, and who is asking those questions. So what does the narrative refer to? Who has an interest in the narrative? What is the origin of the narrative? What am I forced to do? Why do the people tell me those narratives? And with that, we can analyze the two narratives I said. For example, if more people from the North Africa will come to Germany, the country will be destroyed. So we can actually check out the numbers, and we will find out that it's actually the other way around. There are studies showing the more people we let into the country, the better it is for us. So it's actually wrong what they say, and they just want to make us frightened so that we do what they want from us. The other example that when we don't take care of the nature, we won't survive as human mankind. We can also check the facts, and you will find out that there's almost no better science evidence for that. So nothing else is that proven than the man-made environmental change. So this is absolutely true. So if we don't take care about the nature, we will destroy ourselves. So with the tool of the future literacy, we have been able to check the future narrative and if it is actually true or if they want to manipulate us. And this is something we have to do every time somebody tells us in the future we will. So with this kind of a small excursus to the future narrative literacy stuff, we can come back to what Mark Zuckerberg said, because it is also, of course, a future narrative. The next platform in Medium, this is what he said a year ago on the keynote. The next platform in Medium will be even more immersive, an embodied internet where you are in the experience, not just looking at it. And we call this the Metaverse. So why is he doing that? Because he wants us to believe that there will be a Metaverse in the future. And he wants us to take part of it. That's why he says we. And he wants us to take part of it. And we have to check out why is he actually doing this. And understanding that, we can do the next step in a few seconds. But this will hopefully help you to understand every time somebody says, this will be the future, you have to check it out. And I'm very glad that the guys from the XR Guild have been here, because they also gave us the tool set to take care that people with future narratives don't take us over, but we can have ethical standards to actually shape our own lives and decide by ourselves if we want to have that or not. So that's it for the point for this moment. Okay, let's go to what is the Metaverse. When I was checking and reading all the news a year ago, what I saw, and this is what I already told you, is that everybody was just repeating stuff, foreign narratives somebody else said, without reflecting what it actually is. So as a scientist and as a journalist, I asked myself, where is that coming from? Do I have any proof for that? Or in a scientific way, what are the necessary conditions for the Metaverse? And I didn't find any. There are no necessary conditions for the Metaverse, except maybe one thing. And this is science fiction. So what we actually have is a lot of science fiction we can read and try to find something which will help us to understand what the Metaverse actually could be. I will not talk about all those books. I could talk about all those books because they are all very interesting. If you look behind me, you will see the book Otherland standing on the table. It's the one I like the most because it's the most critical one and well-written one, and it's very big. It's 4,000 pages. If you want to read a book, I suggest you do that. You can also read Snow Crash because you can read it very fast. It's easy to read, but it's also a little bit trashy, to be honest. And it will not tell you that much about the metaverse. But of course, as the Snow Crash is the origin of the metaverse, and actually it's the only source which is talking about the metaverse at that point, it's of course something which I took then and said, okay, let's try. I also studied literature in the university. So what I did is I tried to find anything in that book which will help us to understand that word and what it actually means. So if you would define the metaverse by the book today, how would it actually look like? So let's see what the metaverse in the book is actually. The metaverse in the book Snow Crash, where it comes from, is you put on your headset and you are in that metaverse, which is the globe. And around that globe is one street. And next to the street on the left and right sides are houses and locations. And that's it. There's nothing else. There's also nothing else you need to know about the metaverse. And of course, this is something like, okay, that's just a street with houses on the left and right side. What does it mean? It's too small to actually be the real metaverse. It's a metaphor. Of course, it's a book. So it doesn't explain what the reality is, but of course, it's a big metaphor. So when you take the metaphor and you try to project it into the real world, what could it actually be? This is too complicated to explain it right now, but it's good that you have seen it already because it will actually explain very good what the metaverse by the book could be. So if you take the experiences we have today, they would be one building in the metaverse in the book. So every experience you know would be one building in that book. How do you go from one experience to another experience? You use the street. So in the book, you can actually leave the buildings, go on the street, walk around, and then join another building, go into the entrance and do stuff which is possible over there. You go from a cafe to an office building, or you go to the cinema or wherever you want to go. But you always use the street because the street connects everything. So the metaverse could be an infrastructure in which the user can navigate seamless between VR experiences using the VR headset. Clarence explained it in the very beginning, actually pretty good, that he said there are a lot of so-called metaverse experiences, but they are not connected with each other. That's absolutely right, because the street is still missing. This is what some people actually try to develop right now. So the conclusion out of that is that we do not have a metaverse yet. There is nothing in between the experiences, and it has to be a VR experience. So if we take this symbol again, in the metaverse, in Snow Crash, the metaverse is only accessible by virtual reality, which means you cannot join the metaverse in any other way. It's a network of VR experiences. It is not a network of websites, because that's what we already have. You can see that in the second level. So going back here, what is not possible to be part of a metaverse network? Roblox cannot be part of a metaverse network because it is not VR. You cannot move from one VR experience to another VR experience. You cannot move from Roblox to VR chat. This is just not possible. Actually, they are working on it. So they were working on VR, but until then, they are not VR. And would they be part of the metaverse network? They would then be part of the network as a VR thing, and they could actually be part of that. Is Bitcoin part of the metaverse? No. Why? because it is not VR and is not connected to the Metaverse network. It is part of the internet. Decentraland, for example, is also cannot be part of the Metaverse and is not connected to the Metaverse because it is in the internet. It is a plain internet experience where you can walk around and you cannot join another Metaverse. Even Horizon Worlds, which is very close, I would say, to something like a Metaverse, is not part of the Metaverse network because it is a single experience which is not connected to another experience. So you could throw at me any experience and I could explain you that there is no Metaverse network yet because it is not connected in a metaversion way. This is a definition which is by the book, which is very rigid, and which might, if you could say, if you would want to say, like in 10 years we might have that. It's a very rigid definition because it makes you understand what the metaverse might be in 10 years, which doesn't mean that we are not allowed to do anything today, but it's very good to explain what the metaverse might be. So does the metaverse even exist yet? No. What do we have? All the great stuff we're already enjoying today. The internet, everything the big companies provide us for free or for our data. We have a games industry, which really helps us out getting all that immersive stuff and all the interactions done. We have a lot of technologies like headsets, Unity, Unreal, and all that stuff, good stuff, USD. We have already XR platforms, for example, Oculus, which is now Meta. We have also Windows and Android. And we have a future narrative, which is in the future, we will all do something with the maybe metaverse, maybe. But to be honest, this is not a rule. That there will be a metaverse is not a rule. We do not have to obey the future narrative of somebody telling us something. We have to think about it and reflect about it. Do we really want to have something like a metaverse? What will this metaverse be? What is so great about the metaverse? We even don't know yet. What we know, for example, is that there's some really great XR stuff happening already. And I believe if the metaverse hype would die tomorrow, we would still have a very great XR industry, very great XR experiences, and very good stuff we can do with that. We don't need the metaverse. Nevertheless, I have a metaverse podcast and I want you all to click it and listen to it. So I personally believe, yes, the metaverse has a future and we should actually work on it, but not because I say it, but because I believe we can do better than things we already have. All right. How much time do I have, Clarence? Should I continue talking or should we start discussing? Because
I think you are on a roll. Just go on, man.
All right. You just interrupt me, right?
Yeah.
All right. I can do this forever. So you have to interrupt me. So the next step would maybe be to ask yourself, I'm sorry that this slide is not translated yet. The graphic is translated, so that should be fine. Can we actually tell what the future of the metaverse will be, or what the or how the internet will develop in the future? If you check out that graphic I put on the slide, you will discover something from 1992. The graphic is from 1995 because it was published in a book published then, but this actually maps something of 1992. And nobody could say that the web space, which you find in the bubble in the middle somewhere, will be the dominating space of the internet. Nobody could say that. There were, of course, people who believed that, but nobody actually said that the web space will be the one space where we all will do e-commerce, social media, and do funny stuff in the internet, have porn sites in it. There were so many other things that it was unpredictable. And this is where we are right now with the metaverse. Of course, not like that. It's different today, but it tells us very good how we have to handle the future narratives of the metaverse. It is not possible to predict the future, and it's not possible to predict what the metaverse should be. So everybody telling you in the future we have to use blockchain because this is the future of the metaverse. I'm sorry, he's trying to manipulate you, and that you spend your money on him, because this is not safe. It's just not true. We don't know yet, and everybody. There's a rule which is really funny, because if you just say the opposite of that guy, the chance that you are more right than the other guy is higher. So you have to try that out. So everybody, every time somebody says in the future we will, just say the opposite, and you will see that you that the probability of your sentence is higher than the other ones, which is a funny game, mind game, of course. Okay, so I want to also shed light on a very interesting aspect, which is most of the times people don't know about it even. So we live in the internet in a platform economy, which means platforms rule the market. They are almost monopolists, and they rule the market. So if we check out the mobile economy, which you see right now here, you have only two guys dictating what's going on. That's Apple. They have their walled garden around iOS, for example. And then you have Google, and they do their stuff with Android. And there's nothing else. And there's also no room for nothing else. And everybody trying something else, they will die. This is part of the platform economy. If we are lucky, we have something like 2 players, but that's actually not a good thing. All right. When Mark Zuckerberg was thinking what to do next, he of course knew that, and he tried to do his own Mark Zuckerberg phone a couple of years ago. Maybe some of you will remember that. And he of course had no success. By the way, Amazon tried it too and also had no success with it. And the reason is because the market power of iOS and Android is so big that nobody has any room there. And the problem is that you have to obey the rules of those 2 platforms. And when Apple and Google both made stricter rules for gathering data for the ads, Mark Zuckerberg said at the beginning of this year, he lost about $10 billion because of that. So his income is very, very much bound to the rules of others. So what's a good idea? Make your own platform. You cannot do a platform in a market which is already crowded and saturated, which is the mobile platform. So he just created a new market, which is the metaverse market. And this is the reason, the actual reason why Mark Zuckerberg started the hype, because he wants to do his own market and establish his own platform. He tried to do something like a Meta OS. He ditched that trial and stick to Android. It's open source, it's fine, it will work out very good, and Google will also profit from it. But he can actually do on Meta, on the Meta platform, he can do his own rules. And this will be very interesting in the future to see how things develop. Because Apple, of course, also wants to do something with something called Reality OS. Then we have also Android. And then there's, which is, for example, Pico, which launched a new headset today. They are all on Android. Also, the HTC stuff is everything running on Android, like 80%, I believe. And then there's also Windows, but the guys from Windows don't believe there's any future or anything to do in VR, funny enough. So I find this very enlightening to know about the platform economy, and I hope you will understand now why Meta and Mark Zuckerberg is actually doing what he is doing.
Vielleicht, wenn du jetzt, sollten wir um halb dann mal den Leuten noch Gelegenheit geben, ein bisschen zu diskutieren.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so a colleague, Richard McManus, maybe you know them from the US, he formulated this sentence to show the dilemma and the hopes. And this is, of course, something also the XR Guild guys addressed earlier. He said, we can only hope that the metaverse will turn out to be less like the mobile internet and more like the web, open, decentralized, and owned by nobody. And I think this is very well what we should